Welcome to the FangledCast, brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand. Welcome back to the FangledCast. Today, we're really lucky to have Joel Lalgee and Kelly Robinson, two HR professionals, recruiters that I've got high respect for. And we're going to spend a little bit of time today busting a lot of the myths and helping companies understand how to get the most out of recruiters and how people being recruited should be treated and how people grow their business by doing that. So I'm going to get started by first introducing, I'll start with Kelly. If you can tell me a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, sure. So I am a founder of a company called Nose, and we are a talent attraction and retention firm. So we recruit and try to retain that talent for our clients. So we work on behalf of our client partners, different than a contingency firm.
All right, and Joel?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm a founder of a company called Headhunter Media, and I actually help agency owners, so recruitment agency owners, market themselves on social media, paid ads, and help them with their overall content marketing strategy. And I've been doing that for about 2 months. I've had about 5 years of agency recruitment experience prior to setting off solo.
Yeah. The reason what kind of inspired me to want to do this podcast is probably one of the most controversial topics when I'm networking and talking with folks is about how much they hate recruiters. both on the side of companies looking for recruiters to find talent and even more so people who have to deal with recruiters. For example, myself, I can't tell you how many times it's happened where recruiter calls me up and says, Andrew, you're the perfect fit. I've got a client. I know they're going to want you. And I just need you to make a couple. So I'll spend an hour doing what they say, revise the resume, get it all together. They send the resume to their client, and they're going to get back with me by Tuesday. And that's the last you'll ever hear. No emails responded, no phone calls. Just it's like dating in the age of ghosting. So what I'd really like to kind of do and give you some time to talk about is what do you see are the true deficits before we get into the positives of how recruiters should be?
I can jump in.
Please.
Okay. So along the lines of what you're saying, Andrew, I believe that recruiting is a dirty word. And you may have heard me say that before, but you can see people's faces change when you're at an event and they say, what do you do? And you say, I'm a recruiter. So that's why other terms came about, right? Talent attraction, talent acquisition, trying to be, change it up a little bit. But I believe recruiting is a dirty word. And so it's because of what you just said. There are people that don't follow up. They're asking for, applicants to do a lot of work. And on the other end, they're not servicing their clients. So their hiring managers, they really aren't understanding their atmosphere, their culture, what they're looking for, what kind of skill sets, the department culture, the people that fit and they're not asking that. So they're not partnering. And it's really about making a good match on both sides. It's not about pushing and squeezing, and that's what recruiters are known to do.
Yeah, I think that feeds into that idea that most recruiters see candidates like a butcher sees a side of beef.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair metaphor, although it's anti-vegan, I guess, but it's a metaphor. How about you, Joel? What do you think?
Yeah, I think right now the recruiting world, it's almost commoditized people. And so kind of drawing off that point you just made, it's all about how do I spend the least amount of time with people to make the most amount of money. And so whenever money becomes the driving incentive, and a lot of times money is the driving incentive over providing a great customer experience, a great candidate experience, you're going to run into people that don't have the time to do things like follow up, particularly if you're a candidate that's not the right fit or there's something that's come up where they perceive you not to be the right fit. And so you have agency owners who, really they care about the bottom line of their company. They're training people to, essentially just view candidates and even view clients at times as commodities to make money, as opposed to I think a new breed of recruitment firm that's coming out, which is a lot more focused on what Kelly said, which is partnership and really helping organizations with the bottom line, and not just coming in to fill empty seats, but really being a true consultant that cares about their client's business and doesn't necessarily just want to fill an empty role, but really wants to help them find the right people and put the right people in seats and really fill that void of almost not just filling roles to fill roles to get paid, but to really help consult and guide businesses. So we're seeing a lot more agencies that are more focused on partnership and overall service. And I think that the classic headhunter or almost like resume pusher, I think a lot more clients now are getting away from even wanting to work with people like that. And so we are seeing that change, but I do really think it comes from that just general motive of wanting to make as much money as possible.
Yeah, I think there's even an idea out there that most recruiters, especially if we start defining the business models between people that are on contingency or contracted to find someone or otherwise, that a lot of the contingency guys out there, they know if they don't get a candidate in the door, there's no way they're going to get their commission. So I can't find the exact fit, but I got this guy who might make it, and there's almost like a gambling of let's throw this one out there and see if it sticks, because if not, I'm out. I don't make any money this week.
They're trying to sell.
Yeah.
Sell. It's different than recruiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very important as we start to talk about it, because the reality is what is the competitor to a recruiting firm out there? There's other recruiters. There's talent companies like what you're talking about. There's Indeed. There's LinkedIn. There's advantages and disadvantages to all of those. What would you say to a company that decides, you know what, I don't want to spend the money on a recruiter. I'm just going to put an ad up on LinkedIn or Indeed and see if I can find an employee to fill an executive role?
I'll take that one.
Please do.
Let me jump in, because that's actually really timely right now. Because of COVID, there is a lot more people available, right? So one of my biggest fears, and I did a podcast on this, one of my biggest fears is that companies will think, well, there's so many people available, let me just spend $400 for a posting and I could do this myself. The problem with that is you're going to get a ton, more than likely, a ton of applicants. They're not qualified. You're spending your time. You don't know how to screen. Hiring is not rocket science, but it is a skill.
Sure.
For a good recruiter. So it's not easy. I know we make it look easy sometimes, but it's not. That's not a good way. That's not a good way to go, because also what you're doing is you're just seeing the best of what you got. You're not figuring out the best of who is available in the entire market, not just who's looking for a job, not just who submitted their resume. Who can you get available in that skill set?
It's interesting. It's kind of like market research when people think they can just do a survey. What you get with the results of a survey are the exact and scientific responses of people who fill out surveys.
That's right.
I think we learned in political polling what happens when you only poll people that are willing to answer the phone and tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So that's I think that's fitting to what you're talking about. It's interesting too, in that the response from the Indeeds, the Monster.com, and all those guys is, well, we've now built in these filters so only the qualified people get through. And my experience has been that those filters actually hide the gems that you might have wanted to see, because there isn't a quality person in the middle who can look through a resume and go, well, wait a minute, they don't meet all the requirements, but look at those accomplishments. I bet that person could learn.
Yeah. All those machines that they're building, they just figure out who knows how to put the right keywords in the resume. It has nothing to do with the actual skill of the person.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a little bit. The keywords in the resume. You hear about that all the time. It's funny because people put their resume out and immediately they're getting a resume writing service who's evaluating their resume. And I've never seen one from anyone ever come back that didn't say, oh, you need to improve this. You need to buy our resume services. How important is that keyword search function within the resume as opposed to looking at how you outline truly the accomplishments in your career.
Yeah, I think, man, I think there's I don't think there's like 100% answer with this, and I think that's what we run into. So, it's you could break this down to keywords on a LinkedIn profile or keywords into a resume. However you look at it, um, I think you can build a resume intelligently by looking at a job description and looking at the keywords that they're using in a job description and mirror it into a resume.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's still you're still going to have an internal recruiter that reads it. So it's like SEO. It's if you have the right SEO, you'll show up on the search page. If someone clicks on your website and the website content is garbage, then they're going to click away, and you lose the power of it. So the keywords will help you show up, but you still need to be able to tell that story of your accomplishments. And so I think it's important for people to understand that it's number one, you got to experiment. You've got to try out different things. You do have to tailor the resume a lot of the time, but I'm always skeptical of resume writers that say that they've got 100% system, because each company does view it differently, and
Mm-hmm.
the robot will, or the ATS or a robot, that kind of determines which keywords show up and which resumes show up. It's still controlled by a person, and so you still have to have a quality resume that tells a story, because there is going to be a person looking at it. Um, so I think the bigger than question is, well, who do you trust? And I think a lot of it, find out if the resume writer is approaching you, find out who they've worked with and what their success stories are, and I'd beware of people that say they've got like a perfect system or there's a perfect way, because
Yep.
how do you take away the human element of decision within that as well? And that's something that's really hard to perfect.
Yeah, I think you make extremely valid points there. The it's interesting because you look at the advertising of these guys, and almost every time now that somebody fills out, whether it's on Indeed or a LinkedIn, they immediately are attacked with companies that claim, we've evaluated your resume, here's the issues that are with it, we can fix it because we've got a plan. I find most of that to be distracting and unhelpful.
Yeah.
There's I think the best resume writers are people who get referred to you because they help somebody else secure
Yeah.
a great position because they had a good helper. So if I'm a small business and I know that we're going to be expanding and I'm going to need a couple of people on the executive team, I'm going to need some guys in the marketing department, I'm going to need some operations people. How do I find a recruiter? How do I sort through the thousands out there who claim to be the right people to find one that's really going to help me with my business goals and find the right people for my company?
So what I'm helping people to do, or helping agency owners to do, is to really brand themselves as a company and as an individual. But I think if you're looking for a recruiter, and you're a small business, I would definitely refer to people within your network. So I'm guessing if you're a small business owner, hopefully you have a network of other small business owners, or I would reach out to those networks first, because I think that the best recruiters, kind of like to your point with the resume writers, the best people are always going to get referred to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyone can say anything on a website. Anyone can say anything in a sales pitch, but it's reputation. Like, what have you actually done? So I definitely research any small groups you're a part of, any networking groups you're a part of, and go down that channel first, and then open it up. And I'm helping recruitment owners stand out from the noise. And a lot of times these companies are saying, well, I've got to get my SEO right. And the truth is, most people, if you're a small business owner, you're going to have 20 recruiters in your inbox. So obviously you're going to be able to kind of interview them and see what their experience is, but definitely referrals, I think are the best way to go, and find someone who's maybe that step further than you are, that you trust, that's credible. And I think those are the recruiters that are really going to be able to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And then feel it out. Like, a lot of times recruitment agency owners are fighting for time with their clients to get to know them. You need to actually spend time with the recruiter as well, because they are going to be representing your company. So
Mm-hmm.
what the last thing you want is a recruiter that says, yeah, I can get 5 of the best people tomorrow. I would question how they would even do that, because the reality is we're talking about culture fit, we're talking about technical fit. To marry the two, it's going to take a little bit of time. So you have to really interview that recruiter up front. And so when they're giving you a sales meeting, you should equally in that time be really trying to get to understand who they are and what they represent.
You're leading really into the next question, which is,
Yeah.
if I think I found the recruiter I want to work with, what should I be asking them to verify who they are and how they operate, whether they fit the culture of what my company is looking for?
I'll jump in. I
Yeah.
would say that if I was on the phone with you, so say you had a recruiting need, you reached out to me because someone referred. Uh, most of our first conversation is going to be me asking you questions to try to see if it even makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you should not have to know exactly what questions to ask me, because you shouldn't be sold, right? Or pitched. You should be understood. Your
Mm-hmm.
needs, your objectives need to be understood, that I can make sure it's a good fit. Sometimes there's not a sale there, and I'll say, you know what, Andrew, this isn't going to be a fit, but why not? What I think you need is XYZ. Let me make some introductions for you. Or then I'll say, okay, this looks like it could be a fit. Let me answer some kind of frequently asked questions,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and give you some people to call to check on me.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my clients. So
That's huge.
you should ask some questions for sure, but it's wait until you see if it's actually a fit. If someone's trying to push you or sell you and you feel forced to ask questions to like vet them, it's not a great fit. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think.
So one of the issues that comes up that I know from knowing Kelly for a while that you guys do is really trying, as we're recruiting for our companies, trying to get that cultural fit and making sure that the person, even from a personality and other, what kind of research and things do we do with recruits before they get brought to the client that you do, for example, site testing,
No.
um, those types of things.
Yeah, we've done assessments. I mean, for me, it's if I understand, for example, I have one client that really needs, she really needs executors. She doesn't want the visionaries, right? She doesn't want the people she wants the doers.
Yeah.
It's a small company and she's the visionary and she's amazing, but she needs people around that can like do the work. So I threw in, well, why don't we do this quick assessment? It's called Rocket Fuel, and it tells you which one you are right away by the questions. And the person's only going to answer the questions in the right way with what they want to do, because they're not going to end up in the wrong job by answering the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. But for me, it's asking questions. If I know someone needs a doer, I'm going to ask questions about their current role, about the last role, what they did that made them a doer. And I'm not going to say, I need a doer. Tell me how you're a doer. I'm going to ask them specific, well, what was your role in this? What did you do in this? How do you handle this? Have you ever had this types of situation? So that's really important. As far as the culture, for example, this client's a really, really small company. So it doesn't even make sense for me to recruit from a big company. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the right mindset at all. So you can ask a lot of questions about that. How do you feel about being hands-on? There's a lot you can do, and there are tons of other assessments as well.
So I'm getting a feeling that part of your work is extensive pre-interviewing your people before you would ever even present them to your client.
Yeah. Lots
It's
of it.
interesting. I know when I've recruited to build sales teams, which is something that our company's done over the years, we use a series of assessments through an organization that we get them from, that really not only looks at how these people are wired, from what motivates them, what are their attributes, and all of that, but also compares them to a benchmark norm as to people who are high productive in the sales world, to see how they are in their real and their adaptive state. And it's become a very important part of being able to motivate and then coach once the person comes in.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but for sales, DISC. Do you ever use DISC?
I have, yeah.
I love DISC, right?
Yep.
Because you know exactly what that model is. But I also use that for communicating, right? Communicating with people. So sometimes I'll say to people, Just for example, this is something I use all the time and I have it written over here. So I'm going to look, I'll say like, um, what do you feel is most relevant to you and who you are? Do you feel driven, interactive, sensitive, or compliant, right? So that's the
Mhm.
disc. And they answer that. And then the next one I say is dominant, influencer, stable, and control. And right away, I can figure out what they're drawn to as far as how they feel and how they are. And that helps me to understand if they're going to match this client's the position, but also the culture and the environment.
Mhm. So going back in the conversation, so you've made your initial consult with someone, decided they are or they're not a fit,
Mhm.
and then the next step is really a deep dive into understanding the needs, the growth, the history of the business, the personalities of the folks involved, all of that,
Mhm.
or do you then start looking for recruits? Where do you go for the next step in helping find the right person for that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to have that in-depth conversation with a recruiter for it to be successful. And you alluded to it earlier. You get the recruiters that will just throw the 15, 16 resumes. That's always going to happen if you're not spending the time with the recruiters that you're working
Hmm.
with. Um, and I think I would say if a recruiter isn't initiating that, or they're just coming to you with a resume, I wouldn't even waste the time working with them, because what
Hmm.
you'll find then is they'll find a candidate for you. They send over a resume and they've shopped that candidate around to 4 of the companies in town. And then you get into, you're spending time interviewing them, the candidate, even if the resume looks good, you're spending a lot of time. And on the back end, the recruiter is doing the best thing for themselves, which is making sure that they get the best offer so they can make the most money from it.
Hmm.
And obviously the candidate wants that too. They want to make the most money. And so I think if you're finding yourself with recruiters that aren't actually wanting to spend time or aren't even eager to meet with the hiring manager, you're setting yourself up for a disappointing experience. So I think there is responsibility on the client side as well. But if a recruiter just says, "Yeah, okay, we'll get on this and we'll go find people," that's a big red flag, because any recruiter needs to be curious about the clients they're working with. And I tell recruiters a lot, especially when they're first starting out, if a client won't give you time, you don't want to work with them, because you're not actually going to be able to provide them with a great service. So you got to have that deep dive. I like to focus less on the technical side, because I think that is something where if you've worked in an industry, the technical side is not going to change a ton. You really do want to focus on the history of the position, where the company's going, the culture. Uh, Focus a lot on who the hiring manager is and what they're actually like. And unless you have those conversations, I just think going to be really hard for you to sell, for the recruiter to sell the position, and it's going to be really hard for them to know the intangibles of who the person needs to be. Um, yeah, so that's kind of the advice I would give.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know of a person who's in the recruiting business, and they only recruit neurological physicians, brain surgeons,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
that's their one niche, and that's what they do well, which is a very different model than. And by the way, any hospital in the United States that recruits those doctors, they're 90% of that market. And
Yeah.
they understand the need. They follow students from the day they start in their specialty till the time they graduate and otherwise. And then there's a lot of these recruiters that are just sort of, whatever the job is, I'll find somebody for you.
Mhm.
But the strategy I'm curious about is from the recruiter side, because I've seen this from the hiring side, is let's get 2 or 3 recruiters on this and let them compete.
Yeah.
What what do you think the negative outcome of that ends up being?
Just junk. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Well,
junk. They don't care about your. So when I'm meeting with a company, I'm going to say, Andrew, tell me about your business objectives. Like, why do you need this person? Where do they fit in? What kind of what effect are they having on that? What impact are they making on the company? Because people, I want to find the right person. If you work with many recruiters, they're not going to ask that. They're not going to care. They're just trying to throw stuff in and be the faster one, and that's what you end up with. And they're going to try to squeeze a fee, a higher fee. So,
mm-hmm.
just like Joel said, I'm going to say, oh, Andrew, you wanted, 80,000. Okay. Well, they said they'll pay up to like 85. So let's try for that. Right. And then I'm coming to you because I know you're going to give me a 25% fee. And I'm saying like, you won't take anything less than 85.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that doesn't help anyone except for
Exactly.
me, except
That's
for me.
interesting.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a peek behind the curtain for those that don't know the conversation that goes on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I, I look at all industries, and I always have to ask the question: in a perfect world, what would be the relationship between the ideal client and you that's mutually beneficial? What would that look like?
Oh, so I think this is where the future of recruiting is going. It's an exclusive relationship with a consultant. So my idea, if you're in recruiting, the ideal would be to work with 4 or 5 clients in the same industry in different geographic locations that are a very similar type of company. So you're working with a lot of the same candidates, or a lot of similar candidates, really getting to know the industry, really getting to know the personalities, and the same with the companies you're working with, very
Hmm.
similar size companies, because then you really get to be a consultant. And I think that for recruiters, they need to be asking more for exclusivity, and even if that means charging a little bit less, because obviously if someone's working with you exclusive, there's less risk, so you're taking on less risk, so rightly so, you make a little bit less money. But over time, if you make less money and you do a great job, obviously that client's going to come back and say, hey, we actually paid less and we got way better service. And then as a recruiter, you're taking on less jobs, so you're less stressed, you're less stressed, you're able to really focus and become an excellent consultant and industry expert.
Hmm.
The challenge with that is it's not the mindset of the recruiter, it's the mindset of the recruitment agency owner and how they think about time and money
Hmm.
relationships. And so if they look at it and they say, well, we need to up our fees, because that's how we're going to make more money quick in the short term, instead of saying we need to lower our fees and focus more on relationship and exclusivity. So and it's installing that value as an agency owner. You need to be installing the value into your people and saying, we're going to teach you how to be an expert, and you're going to understand the businesses and the clients that we're helping. Now that could end up in charging a higher fee eventually, because I do think there is something to knowing your value. But I think in the short term, if you are getting exclusivity or some sort of retainer, maybe that does mean you make a little bit less, if if
Yeah.
if that if that makes sense.
And I think that most intelligent business owners understand the cost of hiring the wrong person.
Mhm.
That and in the sales world, if it's $100,000 job, the cost of hiring the wrong guy typically works out to around $300,000 in cost.
Mhm.
So, we were talking earlier, Kelly and I, about this part of Fangled's business is the fractional chief marketing officer, fractional chief commercial officer jobs, where companies that don't need someone 5 days a week to fill a function, but
Sure.
need C-level strategic work, we come in. It almost seems that there is an unmet need in this recruiting world for fractional recruiting officers,
Mhm.
where although most companies aren't hiring every day, but to
Mhm.
have someone who's an integral part of the team that attends meetings to know what's going on internally in the company, to anticipate that a position may be coming in the future, to truly understand that there may be an interesting niche in that market for recruiters who want to do what you're describing as that perfect, but taking it to that sort of next level. Does that make sense to you?
I think the challenge with recruiting is, the more a company spends on recruiting, the more they think they need to hire someone internally, because obviously, hey, why are we going to pay outsource a cost? And it really comes in like, how good of a job are you doing explaining the value of recruiting people? And so I think a lot of people do realize now, like, if I hire the wrong person, I'm going to lose a lot of money. But there still isn't the same, like, people don't place the same value on recruiting as they do with a lawyer, or some of these other services that are out there. And until recruiters are able to tangibly explain the
Mm-hmm.
value that they're bringing and articulate that clearly, and then on top of that, execute and actually do a great job,
Yep.
I think that disconnect can continue. But there is a big need, like you
Yeah, I
said.
think I think if they have that inclination, though, that they think they need to hire somebody, and they have the opportunity to get a top level person maybe one day every 2 weeks as part of the team, rather than having to have a full-time person who then, what other jobs do we give them to do while they're not doing anything?
Yeah,
I think there's a model somewhere in there. I don't know where it is. We would have to flesh it out.
there
But
is.
it's something that isn't out there, and to know and have someone on board who knows, we're if we get to this level in the next 6 months, we're going to need someone to fill that position, and have someone integral within the team that I'm not having to pay a full-time salary, benefits, and
Sure.
all of that, is a powerful tool. And the speed to market, by the time the need arises, you're already in the process of looking without spending huge resources to do it.
So RPOs, recruiting process outsourcing, they do that in a form, not exactly what you're saying, but they offer a team, and usually they have someone pretty senior level and executive. I used to be that person, so they have someone that really talks about timelines and budgets and like, why is this open? Like challenging, instead of saying, sure, we'll just fill that position. It's like, well, why are you opening this? Just because someone left? Does that actually mean that you need that position? Like, let's actually analyze, look at that.
Sure.
Well, some of that out there, but most companies are not really, they're not doing it well. The other thing is what Joel said is, I went to market in my business, not doing the recruiting, but doing the consulting and what you're saying, the kind of the executive piece. And I did it. I still do it. No one wants to spend money on recruiting. Unfortunately, they just don't look at it as like, we're going to invest in recruiting. It's sad. I think that is changing, especially with COVID and the work at home and different, innovation. I think people are realizing people are really important to their business, and to keep them engaged, they need to make sure recruiting is tied into the objections, like the overall, goals. So
As a marketing business development guy, I would challenge you to it's because it hasn't been messaged properly so that they can see the value.
100%.
That'd be my
I agree.
pushback to it.
I
But
agree.
it's something to think about. Now we're almost running out of time here, so now I get to ask my favorite question, and I'll start with Kelly. Is there a question that I should have asked you that I didn't ask?
I asked that in the sales process. I always say at the end, is there something that I didn't ask you that you should tell me that I need to know? I can't believe I don't have an answer. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll go to Joel, and if the burning question pops up in your head,
Okay.
raise your right hand, and we'll call on you again.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one question that comes up a lot is just kind of how the pandemic. I mean, we did touch upon it, but from like a networking standpoint and recruitment networking standpoint, like how does the pandemic, or how has the pandemic affected things? I think that would be a question that I like to talk about, mainly because it feeds into my business needs. But
Sure.
Outside of that, I think in general, what I've noticed now is there's a big emphasis on digital relationship building. And what I mean by that is those that can figure out how to use social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever the social network is, and understand how to connect with somebody digitally, and then turn that into an offline relationship and networking. And I'm seeing a big need for this, not just in recruiting, but also in financial advising, for example, is a great one. Most of those businesses were done by networking at events and a lot of these face-to-face. And so I think there's a huge need for experts to rise up that understand how to take a digital relationship or online relationship, an engagement online, turn that into real life relationship. And people who can figure that out, I think over this next continuing time with the pandemic, but coming out of it, I think they're going to position themselves really, really strongly to be able to just really kind of grow their customer bases and grow their relationship bases.
Maybe another piece of that too is that geography's become slightly less important
100%.
in the recruiting process. A job comes up in New York City, and I don't want to live in New York City.
Yeah.
But because of the skill set and accomplishments and the ability to telecommute this way, maybe the geography opens wider, especially if you're in a place that's isn't very rich in quality people. You're in a rural area where there aren't people who have the experience for what your business does.
Yeah.
I think that's also what COVID's taught a lot of companies.
Yeah.
And Kelly, did you come up with one, or we wrap it up?
No, but I mean, I can say from kind of what Joel said, I love talking about the change too in COVID, and like that's something people are always asking. Um, I love that companies are now being open and more flexible with how they work and who they hire and how they engage. And in general, they're just open-minded. So I think like looking forward, we're going to see a lot of changes in a lot of technology innovation and uh, and just a lot of people being more open-minded. They weren't open-minded before, and I think they will now. And I love that because it's helping us as recruiters.
Yeah, someone the other day said to me, this virus has dragged old minds kicking and screaming into the modern
Yes.
age.
Yes,
100%.
it has forced innovation in everyone, even me, and how we're recruiting and how I'm getting business. So it's great.
Interesting. So I'm going to be putting in the feed and in the links how people can get in touch with you. But if you just want to share how, if someone wants to reach out to Kelly or to Joel, what's the best way to get you?
For me, it's LinkedIn. Kelly Robinson. You can find me. Send me a connect request. Let me know that you saw me here, and I will accept it.
Great. How about you, Joel?
Yep, I'd say the same. Definitely, if you reach out, just put a personal note in there about the show. That really helps. And but LinkedIn's definitely the number one go-to place.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate both of you coming on today. This was a great conversation. I think people
appreciate
getting a lot out of it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And
Awesome.
for those of you at home or office or wherever the heck you are listening to this, if you enjoyed it, remember you can subscribe, you can tell your friends, send them a fax, a telex, smoke signals, whatever it takes. We hope you enjoyed the FangledCast and check out some of the other recordings. And we will be back with another episode soon. Thank you so much. Brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand.